Hello everyone, in this video we are building a modern movie app using React, Tailwind CSS and DaisyUI, a perfect hands-on React project for beginners and intermediates. You will learn how to fetch movie data from the TMDB API, search movies dynamically, save favorite films to local storage, and display detailed movie information inside a responsive model, including genres, ratings, and release dates. We will also implement pagination to easily navigate through multiple pages of movie results, just like a real movie database website. This React movie app tutorial will help you understand real-world API integration, state management, and modern UI design using Tailwind CSS components and DaisyUI styling. Whether you're improving your front-end development skills or looking for a portfolio-ready React project, this video is the perfect start. The app will also be fully responsive and look great on any device. So let's begin. Okay guys, so let's open our terminal by pressing Ctrl and backtick, and let's write npm create with add latest, and I will write dot in the end so that everything will be installed inside this folder without any additional folders. So we want to create our application using Vite. So let's press enter. Here let's choose React, then JavaScript. Here I will say no and no again. So let's write npm install. Great, now it's time to connect Tailwind CSS to our project. So here let's click get started, and since we use Vite, we're in the right place. We can skip the first part because we have done it. So let's copy this command and paste it in our terminal. Okay, now we need to configure the Vite plugin. So let's copy this, and inside vite.config.js file, let's paste this import right here. And inside plugins array, let's also use Tailwind CSS. Okay, so let's save this file. Now we need to add an import to our CSS file that imports Tailwind CSS. So inside source folder, we can find a file called index.css. So let's delete everything and paste this import. Okay, now it's time for us to connect DaisyUI to our project. DaisyUI is a Tailwind CSS component library that gives us pre-built styled UI components like buttons, cards, alerts, modals, and so on. So we're on the website, so let's click how to use. And here, as you can see, we need to install DaisyUI as a node package. We use npm. So let's copy this and let's paste it in our terminal. Okay, now we need to add DaisyUI to our CSS file. So let's copy this plugin, and right under this import, let's paste this plugin. So let's save this file, and that's it. Now I will delete this app.css file and remove some boilerplate code here. Okay, now I will take this text and paste it instead of this default title. Okay, so now we are ready to start our application. So let's write npm run dev. So let's open it. Okay, this is how it looks. Okay, now what I suggest to do is to create some states. So let's do it. So we need to create a state to store list of movies. So let's say movies, set movies, and it will be equal to an empty array. And let's also import useState from React. Also, we need to create a state to store favorite movies. Okay, so let's say favorite, set favorites, and also it will be an empty array. After that, we need to create a state for our search term. So let's say search term will be equal to an empty string. Then we need to have a state for our current page number. So let's say const page will be equal to 1 by default. Then we need to have a state for our total number, like total pages. So let's say total pages will be equal to 0 by default. And also we can create a state for our loading, and by default it will be false. Then we need to have a state to store error messages. By default it will be null. And also, as you remember, we need to have a state for a movie which is selected, which is in Modal. So for that, we can create a state called selected movie, set selected movie, and it will be null. Then we need to have a state for our view. So it can be either search or favorites. So let's say const view set view. So by default, it will be search, but it can be either search or favorites. Okay, and now we need to get our API key. So in the root, let's create a file called .env where we will store our key. So let's create a variable called vid_tmdb_API key. Okay, so TMDB stands for the movie database, and on this website, if you go to the footer, as you can see, here you can get API. So we need to click API documentation, and then we need to register for an API key. So we need to click the API link from within your account settings page, and you don't have permission to access this page. So we need to log into your account by clicking here, and I have already done it. So if you follow the instructions, you will be able to do it very easily. Okay, so I have pasted my API key and saved the .env file, and now we need to create a variable to get API key from .env file. So let's create a variable called const API key will be equal to import.meta.env, and we need to say vid_the movie database _API key. So we need to provide the correct name here. Okay, so now we need to create a useEffect hook which will fetch movies, and you'll understand everything better as we keep going. So now let's say that we want to create a useEffect hook. So we need to make sure that we import it. Okay, then we need to do the following. We need to understand if view is equal to favorites, then we need to say set movies to be an empty array. So we need to clear movie list, and we need to just say return so that we will skip API call. And by default, it is search, as you can see. But if view isn't equal to favorites, then let's create a function called fetch movies. It will be an asynchronous function, and we need to say set loading to be true, and we need to clear previous error by saying set error to be null. Then let's use try and catch block, and in case of some error, we can say that we want to set error to be equal to failed to fetch movies. Then let's create a variable to hold endpoint. So let's say let URL, and then we need to understand if user searched something. And if user searched something, it means that search term has to be true. So if that's the case, the URL will look like this. So here, as you can see, we provide our API key, then encode search text and add page number. So if search term is true, we do this. The URL will be equal to this URL, else the URL will be equal to this, because in this case, we just want to show the popular movies. As you can see here, we have popular movies, and here we have search. Okay, after that, we will have some URL, right? It means that we can create a variable which will be called response will be equal to await fetch, and we need to provide our URL. Then if response isn't okay, we can throw new error, and we can, for example, provide this text. And for example, we can say failed to fetch movies. But if our response is okay, we can say const data will be equal to await response.json, and we can say that we want to set movies to be equal to data.results and total pages to be equal to data.totalPages. And we can say that we want to limit max pages to 500, for example. So for that, we can say that we want to use a function called math.mean. And here we can say that it will be equal to data.totalPages, and here we say that maximum it will be 500. Okay, but in this approach, we assume that data.totalPages always exists and is a valid number. But if data.totalPages is undefined or null, then we will see none, which is not good. So we can add some safety. So in this case, we can say data.totalPages or from 0 to 500. So if data.totalPages is falsy, it uses 0 instead. So by doing this, we can just have more safety. So here we can say that we will have either data.total_pages, but if it is falsy, instead of this data.total_pages, we want to use 0. And then we say that we limit it to be 500 maximum. Okay, so it means that we will have maximum 500 pages. Okay, and let's say that we want to show our data in the console. So let's say console log data. Okay, and then finally we need to have a state where we want to say that loading will be false. So let's say finally set loading to be false. Okay, so we are inside useEffect hook. So let's call this function here. And when it comes to the dependency array, it should depend on search term, page, or view. Okay, so let's save this file. And as you can see here, I have an object. So let's open it. So here I have results. And here I have total pages, as you can see, and total results. So as you can see here, for example, I have a movie which is called this. Then I have overview, genre, backdrop path, which is the image popularity, poster, release date. Then let's open this one. Again, we have this movie and the title is him. So we will have this kind of data and we will display it. So the page is 1, total pages is 53,000 and total results is over 1 million. Okay, now you have better understanding of what you will get from the movie database API. Okay, so now let's work with our layout. Let's say that to this div, we want to say that it will be container and we want to center it. Then let's give some padding, which will be 4, and it will be flex. Flex direction will be column, and items will be center, and text will be center. Then instead of this text, let's create h1 tag and let's say movie app. To this h1 tag, let's apply the following styles. Let's say that text will be for Excel and font will be extra bold. So let's save it. And as you can see, here it is. And we can give some margin bottom to it and some shadow. So let's say drop shadow. Okay. Then we can have tabs for search or favorites. So under this h1, let's create a div. And to this div, we can apply the following styles. It will be tabs. It is a class that comes from DaisyUI. Then we can say that tabs will be border. Also, it comes from DaisyUI. First of all, we say that it will be tabs, and then we define what kind of tabs we want to see. So in DaisyUI, if we click tabs, as you can see, tabs border will look like this. Tabs lift will look like this, and so on. And to this div, we can give some margin bottom because under this div also we'll have some other elements. Then let's say that inside of this div, we want to have a tag, and here we will have search/popular and one more a tag, and it will be for favorites. Okay. Then to this a tag, let's say that we want to apply the following styles. First of all, let's use curly braces and let's say that it will be a tab, then text will be large. Then depending on view, we want to apply some styles. So if view is equal to search, then we can apply the following class, which will be tab active. But if view isn't search, we don't want to apply anything. Then when we click this a tag, let's say that on click, we want to do the following. We want to say that set view will be search, and we want to set page to be first page. So we want to reset to page 1. Okay, then to this a tag, we can apply the same styles, but here we need to say if view is equal to favorites. And then when we click this a tag, we just need to say set view to be favorites. And we can remove this curly brace in this case and this semicolon. So let's save this file. As you can see, here we have 2 tabs. So let's click favorites. And now this is active. And now this one is active. Okay, that is great. Now, if our view is search, we want to have a search bar. So first of all, let's create this component. Inside source folder, let's create a new folder called components. And let's create a file called searchbar.jsx. Okay, so now under this div, let's say the following. If view is equal to search, only then we want to have a div, and inside this div, we want to render our component, which is search bar. Okay, to this div, let's apply the following styles. Let's say that width will be full and max width will be medium, and we can give some margin bottom, which will be 6. And then we need to create a function to be able to fetch a movie according to our search term. So let's create a function called handle search. So let's say handle search, and it will accept a term. Then we want to say set search term to be equal to this term, and then we want to reset to the first page. And since our user effect depends on our search term and page, after we call this function, which is fetch movies, will run, and we will see the data according to our search. And we want to say that we want to reset to the first page, because if we think about it, we can realize that it should be done this way, right? Anyway, you will understand everything better as we keep going. So now we need to pass this function to this component. So let's say on search will be equal to handle search. Okay, so let's save this file. And as you can see here, we have search bar, but if I go to favorites, I don't see anything. Okay. So now inside the search bar, let's do the following. Let's say that we want to get access to that function. So let's see on search, and let's create a state called term set term, and it will be equal to use state, and it will be an empty string. Then we can create a function called handle submit. So we want to prevent the default behavior of a page when it is refreshing after we submit our form. So we want to prevent it. So that's why we say prevent default. Then we want to pass our term to this function, which is on search. Okay, so instead of this div, let's say that we want to have a form, and let's say that here we want to have input type will be text and value will be term, and on change we can say that we can get access to this event object, and we can say set term to be equal to whatever we type. Okay, then for the placeholder, let's say search movies, and when it comes to the class name, let's say that we want to use this class, which is input, which comes from DaisyUI, and then we can say input dash success. So it will be a green input. And let's use this function. Let's say that on submit, we want to use this function. So let's save this file. And as you can see, we have this nice style, thanks to the fact that we use these classes from DaisyUI. That is great. Okay, and now what I suggest to do is that inside app.j6, we need to have a moment where we need to show spinner and error message if we have loading or if we have an error. So for that, we can create separate components. So let's say that for our spinner, we can create this component. Okay. So here, let's say that we want to remove this text, and instead to this div, let's say that we want to say it will be flex, justify will be center, and items will be center, and we can give some vertical margin. And inside this div, we want to have a span tag, and to this span, we can apply the following classes. Let's say that first of all, we want to say that it will be loading, so it is from DaisyUI. Then we can say that loading type will be spinner, and we can say that it will be large. Great. So let's save this file. So that's it for our spinner. And now for our error message, we can create a new component. So let's say error message. Okay. So this component will accept the message. So let's say message, and we can do the following. Let's remove this text, and to this div, we can apply the following classes. Let's say that it will be alert and alert error. If you hover over, we can see additional info. Okay. And again, we can give some margin vertically. And now we can show the actual message. So let's say that we want to use span tag and we want to show the message. So let's save this file and let's close them. And inside app.j6, let's say that if we have loading, we want to show our component, which is spinner. So let's say spinner, and let's make sure that we imported it. No, we didn't. So let's say spinner. Okay, let's manually import it. So let's say import spinner from components. Great. And then if we have an error, so let's say if we have an error. Then we want to show our component, which will be error message. And to that component, we want to pass our message, which will contain the error message. And let's also import error component. Okay, so now let's save this file. And now I need to write a search term. So after I press enter, this function should run. When this function runs, loading becomes true. When loading becomes true, our spinner should be shown here. So let's say that here I will say this movie, and now if I press enter, this function will be called and our search term will change. Since our search term changes, this use effect will run and this function will run. So we will see the loading. We should see the loading. For now, we will not see any movie data. We should see only loading. So now I will press enter. And as you can see, we have loading. That is great, guys. Now, if I make a mistake on purpose, so let's say that here I just want to use quotes, for example. So let's save this file. Now let's say that we want to refresh the page. And as you can see, we have failed to fetch movies. Okay, I showed you the usage of our new components, which are spinner and error message. So now let's say that we don't want to have any errors, so let's remove these quotes and let's save this file and let's refresh the page again. Okay, it is gone. So now what I suggest to do is to create a new variable. So let's say that here under this handle search function, we want to say const displayed movies will be equal to, for now it will always be equal to just movies. But then later when we will implement functionality to be able to mark some movies like favorites, we're gonna change this variable a little. But for now it will be always equal to movies. And as you remember, we have a state which is equal to movies. Okay, so basically this variable will be responsible for which list to show. So let's say that under this error, we want to say, so let's say that if loading isn't true and if error isn't true, and if displayed movies.length is equal to 0, then we want to do the following. Let's remove this paragraph for now and let's say that we want to have a div, and inside this div we want to show the text which will be no movies found dot, and then we need to understand if view is equal to favorites or not. So here we leave some space, as you can see, and then we need to understand if view is equal to favorites, for example, then we can say add some to your favorites, and if not, we can say try a different search, for example. Okay, so let's save this file. So now if I write something like this, and if I press enter, as you can see, we have no movies found. Try a different search. But if I remove this, and if I say, for example, cars, so let's press enter, as you can see, we don't have that text because we can easily find a movie according to this search. Okay, so let's remove it. Okay, we handled this scenario. Then we need to do the following. We need to say if loading isn't true and error isn't true and displayed movies.length is more than 0, then we need to do the following. Let's say that we want to have a div. So let's say that we will have a div, and inside this div we want to do mapping. But before, let's say that to this div we want to apply the following classes. Let's say that it will be grid columns by default will be 1. Then on smaller screens and higher, the number of columns will be 2. Then on medium screens and higher, it will be 3. Then on large screens and higher, it will be 4. And let's say that gap will be 4 and width will be full. Then we can say that we want to map displayed movies. So let's say displayed movies dot map. And here let's say that we will have a movie. Then ideally we need to have a separate component for a movie card. So let's create a component called movie card.j6. Okay, and let's say that we want to render this component, which is movie card, and we want to pass to it the whole movie object. And then since we do mapping, we can say that we want to have a key, and we can say that key will be equal to movie ID. Okay, so let's save this file. And as you can see, we have a lot of movie cards. So now let's work with movie card component. Okay, here first of all, let's get access to the movie object, which contains data like title, release date, and poster path. Okay, then let's create a variable called poster URL. So let's see, poster URL. So we need to understand if movie has poster path or not. So if movie really has poster path, then we can say that we want to show it. We want to use actual movie poster. But if movie doesn't have a poster path, we want to show placeholder image. Okay, so now let's remove this text and let's say that here we want to have an image, which will be our poster. So let's see, poster URL. And for the alternative option, for better accessibility, we can say movie.title. Okay, so let's give some styles to this image. Let's say that width will be full and height will be 96 and object will be cover. Then when we will hover it, so let's say when we hover it, we want to make it look a bit bigger and duration will be 300. And we need to say that it will be on group. So let's say group dash hover. Since we have group here, it means that the parent should also have this class. So what is group? So in Tailwind, the group class is used to connect hover or focus states of a parent element to its children. So basically we can say that when the parent is hovered, change the style of this child, for example, and you'll understand everything better as we keep going. Okay, and let's also say that we want to have rounded to be to XL, overflow to be hidden, and we can give some shadow, which will be large. Okay, so let's save this file. And as you can see, here we have movies, and it is according to my last term, and it isn't the popular. So let's refresh the page to see the popular. So these movies are trending or popular movies. Okay, so as you can see now, when I hover, I see this nice effect. When the parent is hovered, the child is becoming a bit bigger. But you can say that I can do it very well even without this group. Okay, so let's say that we can remove it here. Yes, you're absolutely right. We can do it without this grouping. But the thing is, when we hover, we also want to show buttons. It means that several children should be triggered when a parent is hovered. So that's why we need to have group. You'll understand it better as we keep going. Okay, so now let's say that when we hover, we want to have some overlay. So under this image, we want to have an overlay. So let's create a div, and let's say that to this image, we can say that it will be poster, and to this div, we can say that it will be overlay. So this overlay should contain h2 tag, which will be equal to movie.title and also the year movie's release date. So let's create a p tag, and we can say if movie.release date is true, let's say date. So if it is true, we can say movie.release, let's say movie.release date, and then we want to have only the first 4 characters, which will be for the year. So we need to say substring function, and we need to say that we want to get only the first 4. Otherwise, if release date isn't provided, we can say n/a, like not announced. Okay, so we want to have this data when we hover, and at the same time we want to have buttons. So for that, let's create a div, and this div will have this button, and it will be for details, and one more button to be able to add it like favorite. And for now, I will just say add to favorite, and we didn't implement functionality for that, but it will be like this. Okay, so to this h2 tag, let's say that text will be XL and font will be bold. Then text will be white and margin bottom will be 2. And for the paragraph, let's say that it will be gray 300 and margin bottom will be 4. To this div, let's say that it will be flex and gap will be 2. Then to this button, let's say that it will be button class from DaisyUI. Then button will be small and button will be primary. And to this button, let's just say that it will be button and button will be small. Okay, so let's save this file. And as you can see, here we have title, year, and these buttons. Okay, so we want to see only the image. And when we hover this image, we want to see this title, then year, then these buttons. So for that, let's say that to this div, we want to say that it will be absolute and inset will be 0. Inset 0 means that top will be 0, left will be 0, right will be 0, and bottom will be 0. Then let's say that background color will be black with some opacity, and it will be 70, for example. Then let's say that initially opacity will be 0, but when we hover, we need to say opacity to be 100. Then let's say that duration will be 300, it will be flex direction will be column, justify will be center, items will be center, text will be center, and padding will be 4. Since this div is absolute, we need to have a div which will be relative to this div. And we can say that this div will be relative to it. So let's say relative, and that should be it. So let's save this file. And now, when I hover, I don't see it for some reason. Okay, we will find it out. Oh, it is because here I forgot to say opacity 100. Okay, so let's save it. And as you can see, when I hover, we see this nice effect. Okay, that is great. So as you can see, when we hover only one parent, several elements are being used. Image, as you can see with group hover, and this overlay with this group hover. So that's why we have this grouping for this one and for this one. So that's why we need to use group class. And if I remove group from here, and if I remove it from here and from here, let's see what will happen. So as you can see, yes, I see this effect, but at the same time, the image isn't big like I want, okay? It isn't scaling. Even though I hover the parent element, the image isn't being triggered because this overlay is on top of it, because since it is absolute and inset. So image doesn't change at all. But if I have group here, here, and here, the parent element is being triggered. So when the parent element is being triggered, also this image will be triggered because it has group, the same as parent, and this one, which also has group. Okay, I think that now it is clear to you. If you have some questions, feel free to write them in the comments. Okay, let's see how it looks on big screens. Okay, this is how it looks, and it looks really nice. We can hover and we can see the data. Great. Now let's say that I want to write, let's say forest gump, and I will press enter. And as you can see, we have movies according to our search term. That is great. We have only 2 movies according to our search. Now if I go to favorites, we have nothing, and here we have movies. Okay, so let's refresh the page to reset it, and now we see trending movies. Great. Okay, now let's go to app.jsx, and now we will be working with local storage. And first of all, we need to create a state to check if local storage is ready. Okay, so let's say const initialized, set initialized, and by default it will be false. So you will understand it better as we keep going, and I will explain why we need this state. So under this API key, let's say that we want to load favorites from local storage. So when our application just mounts, we want to run this use effect on first render. So we need to load favorites from local storage. So let's say use effect, that we will use use effect hook. Okay, and here let's do the following. Let's say that we will have stored favorites. Let's say const stored favorites will be equal to json.parse, and we want to get favorites from our local storage. So we want to read favorites, or we will have an empty array. Then we need to set favorites to be equal to stored favorites and initialized to to be true. And again, as for dependency array, it will be an empty array because it will run once. Okay. Then at the same time, we need to create one more useEffect hook to save favorites to local storage whenever favorites change. So let's say useEffect. Okay. So as I said, this useEffect should depend on favorites and initialized. So let's say that if initialized is true, only then we want to say local storage set item favorites, and we want to see JSON stringify favorites. We want to save it to local storage. Okay, and now why do we need to have initialized? So it's like a safety flag. It helps our app make sure that data from local storage has been properly loaded once before doing other operations. So when the app starts, it wants to load favorites from local storage. Then we set them into state by saying set favorites. But we also have an effect that saves favorites to local storage whenever favorites change. So without this flag, both steps can run at almost the same time, causing weird things like overwriting the loaded data before it's used, or an empty favorites array being saved before the actual one is loaded. So we use initialized to prevent that timing issue. Okay, maybe you don't understand it now, but I believe that as we keep going, you'll have a better understanding. Okay, so now let's create a function to add or remove favorite. So let's say that we want to create a function called toggle favorite, and it will accept a movie object. Then we need to understand if a movie is already in favorites. So let's say const exists will be equal to favorites dot sum method, and let's say that here we will have f, and if favorite ID is equal to movie ID, it means that this movie is already in favorites. If that's the case, so let's say if it exists, we want to do the following. We need to filter out that movie from our favorites. So that's why we say favorites.filter method. Then we say favorite.id isn't equal to this movie.id. So it means that we want to filter our favorites array, and we want to keep all the movies whose ID isn't equal to this incoming movie ID. It means that we want to filter out the movie which is already in favorites array. Okay, else let's create a favorite object. Let's say const favorite movie will be equal to ID will be equal to movie ID, then title will be equal to movie title, and path will be equal to path, then release date, and also we will have overview and vote average. Okay, so here we create favorite object, and we have this data, for example. Then we want to say that we want to keep all favorites as they are and add this new movie to this favorites array. So we just add to favorites list. Okay, then we need to understand if movie is already favorite. So let's say const is favorite, and it will accept a movie ID. Okay, and then we need to say favorites dot sum, and here let's say that again we try to understand if movie is already favorite, and looks like we have an error. Yeah, we just need to remove this curly brace. Okay, now we don't have any error. So we need to understand if a movie is already favorite, as I said. And now when it comes to these displayed movies, we need to do the following. We need to say if view is equal to search, then we want to have movies. Otherwise, we want to have favorites. At the same time, here when we have favorites, we want to have not only just favorites, but also we want to show favorites length. Okay, so we want to show favorites length. So let's save this file. And as you can see, we have 0 favorites. And if we go to favorites, no movies found, add some to your favorites. Okay, and for now we didn't implement functionality for that, but very soon we will do it. Okay, so now what I suggest to do is to pass toggle favorite function and is favorite function to our movie card component. So let's say on toggle favorite will be equal to toggle favorite. Then is favorite will be equal to is favorite movie.id. Okay, so as you can see, we already pass the movie ID to this function. So let's save it. And now inside movie card component, let's get access to that function, which is onToggleFavorite and isFavorite function. Okay, now let's come to these buttons and let's do the following. So let's say that when we click this button, let's say on click, we want to pass the whole movie object to onToggleFavorite function. So let's say we want to pass the whole movie object to this function, and based on if it is favorite or not, we want to show the text. So let's say if is favorite true, we want to show remove, and if it is not true, we want to say favorite. And when it comes to classes, let's say that we want to use curly braces and backticks, and let's say the following. Let's say if is favorite true, we want to apply the class which will be button error. If not, we want to apply the class which will be button secondary. Okay, so let's save this file. And now let's try to add this movie to our favorites. So let's click favorite. And as you can see, now we have remove text, and also favorites becomes 1. So let's go to favorites, and here we have this movie. Now, if I refresh the page, as you can see, we still have that favorites is 1. We still have it. It isn't gone. Okay, so let's try to do it one more time. So let's add this one, and let's try to add this one, then this one. And as you can see, we have 4 favorite movies. Now, if I refresh the page, they are still there, and this movie is still there, as you can see. And we didn't add this one, we add this one and this one. Now let's go to favorites tab, and as you can see, here we have them. So let's try to remove this one, and it is gone. And if we come back, we can see that it is really gone. Okay, that's it. Now we can do the following. When we click this details button, we want to show the model where we will see additional info, because right now when we hover, we see only the title and the year, but we want to get more info. So let's try to do it. Okay, so let's go to app.jsx file, and we need to create a function to be able to open model. Okay, so let's say that we want to create a function called open model, and it will be asynchronous, and it should accept movie ID. So let's say movie ID. Then we need to clear old errors. So let's say set error to be null, and let's say that we want to use try and catch block. Okay, so here we have this response, and we want to fetch the movie using this ID, using movie ID. And if response isn't okay, we say failed to fetch movie details. If it is fine, we get the data from the response and say set selected movie to be the data from the response. Otherwise, we set error to be failed to fetch movie details. We need it because when we click this details button, we need to fetch movie details. Okay, so that's why we do it. And then we need to create a function to be able to close model. So let's say close model, and here let's just say, here let's just say set selected movie to be null. Okay, so let's save this file. Okay, then we need to do the following. If selected movie is true, only then we need to do the following. So let's say if selected movie is true, only then we need to create a separate component which will be called movie details model. So let's create that component. So let's say movie details model.jsx. Okay, so if selected movie is true, only then we want to have this movie details model component, and we need to pass to it the movie object. So let's say movie will be equal to selected movie. Then on close, we need to pass the function which will be close model. And then when we deal with this model, we also want to be able to make it to be favorite or remove from favorites. For that, we need to pass the function which will be isFavorite. And here let's say isFavorite selected movie.id, and on toggle favorite function, let's say on toggle favorite function, and here let's say toggle favorite and selected movie. Okay, so let's save this file and work with movie details component. So here let's get access to movie object, then to onClose function, then to isFavorite function, and on toggle favorite. Okay, then again, here we need to understand if movie has a poster. So let's see, const poster URL will be equal to movie.poster path. So if there is poster, we need to use this URL. Otherwise, we want to show this placeholder image. So if movie has poster, we want to use the actual movie poster. Otherwise, we want to show this placeholder image. Then let's say that this div will have the following styles. Let's say that it will be Modal, a class that comes from DaisyUI. Then Modal will be open. Again, it is from DaisyUI. Then let's say that we want to create one more div, and to this div we can apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be Modal box, width will be full, max width will be 2XL, and on smaller screens and higher it will be 3XL, max width will be 3XL, and background color will be base 100, and we can give some shadow which will be XL. Then let's say that we want to have h3 tag, and let's say that it will be for movie title, movie.title, and let's give some classes to it. Let's say that it will be font will be bold, then text will be XL, on smaller screens and higher text will be 2XL, and margin bottom will be 4. Then when it comes to poster, let's say that we want to have an image tag, and for the source, let's say poster URL, and for the alternative text for better accessibility, we can say movie.title, and for the class, let's say that it will be rounded large, and margin bottom will be 4, and width will be full, and object will be contain, and we can see that max height will be 96. Okay, then after the poster, let's say that we want to have a section for description. So let's say description, and here let's say that we want to have a div, and then we need to have a paragraph where we will show the movie overview. So let's say movie.overview. Okay, then let's say that to this paragraph we want to apply the following style, which will be leading relaxed. So it is for line height basically. Okay, then after this paragraph we want to have one more paragraph, and here let's say release date, and here actually we can wrap this release date inside a span tag. Okay, so here we have release date, then we need to give some space since span is an inline tag, and here we can say movie.releaseDate, otherwise not announced. And when it comes to the styles, let's say that it will be font will be semi-bold. Okay, then the same should be done for rating. So let's say paragraph, and let's just accept this, and for the styles let's just apply these styles again. And for genres, okay, let's say that here we want to have a paragraph and it will be for genres. So let's just copy this, paste it here, let's say genres, and here let's give some semicolon. So let's remove this, and let's say that here we want to have movie.genres. So if it is true, then we want to do mapping. Okay, so we can just accept it. So we map our movies genres, and then we join them using comma. And if movie genres isn't true, we just say that it is not announced. Okay, so after this section we need to have a section for our buttons. So let's say buttons. Okay, so let's say that we want to have a div, and to this div, let's say that it will be flex, flex will be wrap, and gap will be 3, and justify will be end, and margin top will be 6. So here we will have a button, and depending on if is favorite is true, here we will have remove from favorites or add to favorites. Okay. And again, when it comes to the styles, let's say that here we want to use curly braces and backticks, and if is favorite, let's say that first of all it will be a button, then if is favorite true, then let's say that the class will be button error, otherwise the class will be button secondary. Okay, and then we need to have one more button. So let's say button. Here let's say close, and for the classes let's say that it will be button, and when we click this button we want to call the function which will be on close. Okay, and under this div let's say that we want to have modal backdrop. So let's say modal backdrop, and here let's say that we want to have a div, And when it comes to the styles, let's say that we want to apply the class which will be modal backdrop. And when we click it, we can call the function which will be onClose. So let's save this file. So we need this modal backdrop because it will cover the page when modal is open. So we can close the modal by clicking outside. Okay. And now if I click details, nothing will happen because inside movie card component, I don't have the function to be able to do that. So let's go to app.j6 and find a movie card component. And let's say that on view details, we want to pass a function which will be open modal. Okay. So let's save it. And now inside movie details, inside movie card component, let's get access to it. So let's say on view details function, on view details function. So let's take it. And then when we click this button, let's say on click, we need to call this function and we need to pass to it ID, movie ID. So let's say movie.id. Okay, so let's save it. And now let's open it on bigger screens. So now let's open, for example, this movie. Let's click details. And looks like we have an error. It says that too many re-renders. React limits the number of renders to prevent an infinite loop. Okay, so let's refresh the page and try to find out why we have that error. Well, guys, the problem is that here, when I work with movie details model, I call the function immediately during rendering, okay? And I don't pass it as a callback. So we need to fix it, okay? So it should solve the problem. So I didn't notice it, sorry. So now let's save this file, okay? And let's try to do it on bigger screens again. So now let's click details. And as you can see, we have details. But at the same time, all the text in the center. Let's fix it. So let's go to movie details. And when it comes to the description, to this div, I forgot to add some styles. So let's say that text will be left. And then we can give some space, which will be 2. So let's save it. And now let's open it again. And as you can see, it looks much better. So we can click close and close this model like this, or we can close it if we click outside, okay? And at the same time, we can add it to favorite. So let's remember this movie. Let's click details. Now I will say add to favorites. And as you can see, the text didn't change. So let's try to fix it. So let's come to these buttons. And when I click this button, I should call the function which is on toggle favorite. Okay, so let's save this file. Okay, so now if I click add to favorites, as you can see, it is added. So let's close it. And as you can see here, we have 4 favorites. And this is the one that we have just added. Now let's say that I want to open, for example, this movie. So let's click details and I want to remove it. So let's click remove from favorites and it is gone. So if I close it, it is gone. Now let's open this one and I can remove it. And as you can see, it is gone. But now if I click add to favorites, it should be right here. So let's check it. So let's close it and here it is. Now let's refresh the page, go to favorites again, and here it is. Okay, that's it, guys. Everything seems to be working. So now what we need to do next is to add pagination. So let's try to do it. Okay, so now let's go to app.j6 and let's say that here above this selected movie, we want to have our pagination. So let's say if view is equal to search and total pages is more than 1, and if loading isn't true, and if there is no error, only then we want to show our pagination component. So first of all, let's create it. So inside components, let's say pagination. Okay, so let's say that here we want to render this component. Okay, and actually let's wrap this pagination component inside of a div, and to this div we can give some styles, and let's say that margin top will be 6. Then to this pagination component, let's pass the following properties. Let's say that current page will be equal to page, then total pages will be equal to total pages, and then we need to create a functionality to be able to change the page. Okay, so let's create a function. Let's come here and let's do it above open model. Let's create a function called handle page change, and it will accept new page. And then we need to say if new page, so let's say if new page is greater or equal 1 and new page is less or equal total pages, we need to say set page to be this new page. Okay, so now let's take this function and we need to pass it to our pagination component. So let's say on page change will be equal to this handle page change function. Okay, so let's save this file. And if we go to the bottom, as you can see, we have pagination. Great. So now let's go to pagination component, and here let's get access to current page, then to total pages, and to a function which is on page change. Okay, so now what we need to do next is that we need to have a range. So let's say const range, and let's say that it will be equal to 3. So it's basically like how many pages to show before and after the current one. Okay, then let's say const start will be equal to math.max function, and it will be equal to current page minus range. So it will be first page in visible range, and the same for the end. So let's say const end will be equal to math.min total pages current page plus range. It will be for last page number in the visible range. Okay, and then let's create a variable called const pages will be equal to array.from, and this is an array of visible page numbers. And maybe you are confused a little, but let me try to explain it to you. So here we have array.from length and minus start plus 1. So it creates an empty array of a specific length. So we can suppose that start is equal to 4 and end is equal to 10. Then end minus start plus 1 will be 7. So it will create like 7 elements. Here we have underscore I and start plus 1. So this is a mapping function that tells array.from what each element should be. Here underscore is the element and I is the index. Then if start is equal to 4, we will have start plus I will be 4 plus 0 will be 4. Then on the second step we will have 4 plus 1, it will be 5. Then we will have 4 plus 2, it will be 6, and so on. Here underscore is the element, and the element isn't used here. Index is used here. Okay, I think that you get it. And if you have some problems with understanding it, you can always try to experiment and try to do it yourself, and you will understand it better. Okay, so now let's say that to this div we can apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be flex, justify will be center, then margin top will be 4, margin top will be 4, and flex will be wrap. Then let's say that we want to give gap, which will be 1. So let's remove this pagination now, and let's say that we will have the following. Let's say that we will have a button, and to this button we can apply the following class, which will be button, and here we can say previous, or we can do the following. So I will just paste this sign, as you can see, okay? And let's say that this button should be disabled when current page is equal to 1. And then on click, let's say set, let's say on page change to be 1. Okay, it will be the first one. Then let's say that we need to do the following. If start is more than 1, we can have dots. So let's say if start is more than 1, we can have a button, for example, and here we want to show dots if pages are hidden. And let's give some styles to it as well. Let's say that it will be button and button will be disabled. So let's say disabled, okay? But if we have pages to show, we can say pages.map, okay? And here let's say that we want to have a button, and each button should have a unique key. In this case, it can be page itself. Then here we want to show page itself again. And when it comes to the styles, let's say that here we want to use curly braces and backticks. And first of all, it will be a button. Then if page is equal to current page, then we can say that it will be button primary. So let's say button primary. Otherwise, we don't want to apply any styles. Okay. Then after these pages, if end is less than total pages, we can also do the same situation like we did it here. Okay. And then after that, we can have a button to be able to go to the last page. So I will just paste this icon, and let's say that here we want to apply this class and it should be disabled. So let's say it should be disabled when current page is equal to total pages. And on click, when we click this icon, we want to say on page change, and we want to pass total pages here. So let's save it. And looks like we are on the last page or something. So let's go to the bottom. Yes, we are on the last page. Well, it is because again here I forgot to use this callback function. Okay. And then here I also forgot to put it here. Okay, so let's save it. Now let's say that we want to refresh the page and we are on the first page. Let's open it on bigger screens. Okay, this is how it looks. Let's go, for example, to the third page, but nothing is happening. It is because when I click this button, I also need to say on click, then on page change to be the page. Okay, so let's save it and try to go to the fourth page. And now we're on the fourth page. Okay, now let's try to go to the sixth page. Okay, now let's say that I want to add to favorite this movie. And here it is. That's great. Now if I click this icon, as you can see, I am on the very last page. And if I click this icon, I'm on the very first page. Okay. Also, I noticed this behavior. So let's say that I am on the fourth page, then I go to favorites, then if I go to search popular, I am on the very first page again. But if you don't want to have this experience, we can do the following. So let's go to app.j6 file, and here when we switch tabs, as you can see, we say that it will be equal to first all the time. But if you don't want that, you can say that it will be equal to just page. So let's save it and try one more time. So let's say that I will go to the third page. So now I am on the third page. Now I will go to favorites, and if I go to search and popular, as you can see, I am still on the third page. But if you want to go to the first page immediately, you can say that when you click this search and popular, you want to have the first page. It's up to you. But I want to have this experience. Okay. Okay, now let's go to the first page. And I also want to show you one more thing. If you want to have a button here, we can do it very easily. So let's go to search bar component, and we need to do the following. Let's say that here under this input, we want to have a button, and we can explicitly say that its type will be submit. However, the button type is already submit because we use it inside of this form, but we can always manually say that it will be submit. And let's say search here. Then let's add some styles. Let's say that it will be button, and button will be success. And then to this form, we can apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be flex, gap will be 2, justify will be center, and margin bottom will be 4. So let's save it. And as you can see, now we have this button. Okay, maybe you like it better. So now let's say that I want to write, for example, Spider-Man. Let's click search. And as you can see, here we have the movies according to our query. Okay. So that should be it. Let's see how it looks on smaller screens. Okay. Okay. So that's it, guys. If you find this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you. I really appreciate it.